Hey, welcome to Planet Hex. I'm Andrew Horns. Yesterday I was back in Alfreton in Derbyshire to once again visit the 80s video shop on King Street. As you can see from the posters, this time it was to go and launch the new version of my VHS Ate My Brain book. It's always a great place to visit, but seeing my face on the posters and signing books for visitors was a brand new thing for me. I've autographed my books and comics before, but this was the first time I've been to an event that was solely for something I've written, and it's a night I'll never forget. This year my goal is to experience more, and this was certainly an experience. The 80s Video Shop is a haven for retro film fans, featuring a video store museum attraction, merchandise, an escape room, a recreation of a retro kid's bedroom, and a private cinema room. It's a place I've come to love, and I'm really grateful to Rob and Chris for staging the event for me. I didn't get much video, but as well as signing some books and staging a screening of one of my vintage film trailer compilations in the shop's cinema, I took part in a Q&A with Rob Lane, who, as well as being part of the 80s Video Shop, also presents the excellent Straight to Video podcast. Do check that out, it's really well worth a listen. That Q&A is presented here in this episode of Planet Hex, and Rob will be sharing it through the 80s Video Shop socials as well. Do check out their channel because there's some really good stuff on there. It was great to chat to Rob about the book, growing up with VHS, and why the VHS collecting scene has developed in recent years. Check out the 80s dude's bedroom. This rules. Shuffle. Poison. It's literally Rob's bedroom as a kid, as Eddie. I need these curtains in my life. These curtains rule. Marty. Imagine that watching you sleep. Got original Return of the Jedi bedding. This is classic. JP on a Mega Drive. Check this out. This is great. I'm back home. I love it. I love this place so much.
It actually looks like you as well.
Mate, Rob has just shown me this. Is this mine?
That's yours.
Mate, thank you so much. A VHS Ate My Brain frame from Arcade Frames. Big up Arcade Frames. You got a card? For Arcade.
Just arcade frames. Yes.
I'll put it up over the screen. But that rules. It's got tapes.
Just
the
t-shirt
VHS tape. Oh, he's got the lunch meat shirt on as well. It's me with a guitar and a tape. Good choices on the background. I wholeheartedly approve. Ah, I'm having a great day.
Alright, we're here at the 80s Video Shop. My good buddy Andrew Horns.
Hello, I'm Andrew Horn from Planet Hex channel, and I wrote this, which is all over the shelves today.
We are
This is
talking
awesome.
about VHS Ate My Brain, but it's not the first time this has been out. It's
No.
celebrating, is it almost 10 years? Coming up to 10-year anniversary?
March 2014 it came out, so it's not far off 10 years.
2014.
But it sold well. People were still buying it, but it needed a facelift. So this is a revised edition.
First question though, why did you do it originally?
Because I wanted to buy it. I know it's a cheesy thing that a lot of writers say is that I wrote it because it didn't exist.
Okay.
But I was heavily into collecting VHS for many reasons. For the price, because it was cheap, and I was on a low-paid job, and at the time, and also because I wanted to rescue them. Everything was moving towards DVD. This is before Blu-ray and things like that came in. But I wanted to rescue the things that I'd rented that meant so much to me when I was a teenager, in those formative years.
Did you ever stop buying VHS? Did you do that? A lot of us, myself included, kind of once DVD came in, it became more accessible. It's like, oh, this is better quality. Get rid of the VHS, let's replace them.
I kept them, but I did stop buying new VHS, and I just bought old ones. It's like, no, I've seen that, I've got a connection to that.
Right.
I remember seeing that with my dad, I remember seeing that with my mum, that sort of thing.
Okay.
It became the nostalgia thing. When I moved into DVDs, you know, it was a great thing for the at the start of it, and then it became much of a muchness, I think. I do prefer physical media to streaming. I'm not really into companies I pay money to knowing what I'm watching all the time. It feels uncanny.
Yeah.
You know, but it's probably just 'cause I'm getting old. But I wrote it because I wanted to put something into the VHS community myself, because I'm still part of the Horror VHS Collectors Unite page on Facebook, which I'm sure you remember that.
Yeah, that was the first group I actually got back into, because I was like lots of other people. I'd say one of the reasons we created this shop, and one of the rewards from this shop, is seeing people's reactions when they come in and to something which they've probably literally thrown away, not physically thrown away like a lot of us, including myself, threw away.
It's filed away mentally.
We threw away those memories of the video shopping away, and they come back in and it's like, wow, I'd forgot all about this kind of thing.
Being able to browse around things.
Yeah. So what kind of, this came out in 2014, when did you actually start putting pieces together, think, right, there's something I can tell a story?
I'd started putting some blog posts together, and I think it was my wife that had said, you should put something together longer about this, try and get some newspaper stuff and things like that. And I did put some feelers out to get some like magazine or newspaper pieces, and it didn't work, so I thought I'd put it together myself. And I didn't think anyone was going to read it. I didn't think anyone outside of the small niche community I was part of, I didn't think anyone was going to pay any attention to it at all. And then they did. I was like, oh god, it's full of typos and stuff like this, and it's like not how I envisioned it. Speak. There's too many tapes, I blame them. But it started taking off, and I started getting messages from like Brazil and America, Canada. I got one from Japan, which was amazing. Australia, I got a few, and loads in the UK, saying this has brought back loads of memories. Reviews were all right. The first review gave me a 1 star. I hated it, but then
can only go up from there.
It improved from there. But the thing that I got from it was lots of people had that nostalgia fix from it, because I talk a lot about going to Metro Video in Sheffield, where I'm from, and the nights I would spend, sometimes longer than the films themselves, trying to decide. Getting the new releases downstairs and then going upstairs to the room where it was 2 for £1 for 3 nights of all the old where tapes went to die. And that was my paradise. There was no windows, there was nothing, it was just me in this big, it was like about this size actually, the size of this room of tapes that are just fading, and that made me love them even more. So when that started moving into DVD, they sold off a load of their tapes, and I remember buying like armfuls of the ones I'd rented.
These are coming home with me.
Yeah, they had to be rescued. They had to be rescued and come with me. I remember got the entire series of Nemesis films, the Albert Pune cyborg movies. With Olivier Gruner in the first one.
Nice.
And I remember renting all of them in the 90s and loving how bad they were, but yet how good they were at the same time. And they were like £2 each for the tapes. I'm like, thank you very much, I'll have these.
Do you think you own some of the ones you actually rented? Not just the same film, but the actual videotape which you own?
I do a couple. The one I cherish the most of those is Generation X, which was a 1996 TV movie, an X-Men TV movie. It's the actual first X-Men movie. And it had a budget of like $2 million, and it had the only proper X-Men it had in it were Emma Frost and Banshee, and it had the Generation X team in it that was a comic at the time that had like Jubilee in it and so on. They'd gone on to form their own team overseen by them as a new school, and I loved it. It had Matt Frewer in it as the villain, and Max Headroom as the villain. He's always value.
Yeah.
He gets crazy. He's like a villainous Jim Carrey in it. It's great. But I loved that dearly because I was a big fan of Generation X, the comics, and Marvel in general. I was like, oh my god, live action X-Men movie. Even though they'd got a load of the characters wrong, they'd cast a white girl as Jubilee. She's Chinese.
You're from a comic book background as well.
I am.
You worked in a comic book.
I worked in a comic book store for 9 years.
So you know your stuff. They couldn't get that stuff past you.
I've written comics as well in the States and in England, so it's good fun. No, they couldn't get that stuff past me, but I loved it dearly. And what I did with that tape is I went after I rented it, I said, can I buy a copy of this from you? And the lady knew me, the lady at the counter, and she's like, come back on Monday. It was like Friday night, I'd rented it, taking it back on Saturday. Come back on Monday and you can, just have the weekend with it. Because they got like 3 copies and they sold me it for $7.99, and I've still got the receipt she handwrote inside. Yeah. Handwritten receipts are great. I do actually, and tapes that I've picked up just from collecting, when I found them with retail receipts in, I love them even more.
Yeah.
you know, it's like this was purchased at 2:15 on, you know, Wednesday, May the whatever.
And it's the old school style. Like you say, you can either have a written receipt or even the ones from the old school cash register.
Yeah.
You can tell the style.
Yeah,
so.
it's slightly faded. This was a handwritten one with a rubber stamp of Metro Video's address on it, and it's very dear to me, that direct connection. I think that's a big thing that we, as collectors, we want that direct connection to something that was so formative. And because we can hold the thing that gave us this huge rush, like Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. I remember the first time I saw it. It was from a corner shop near where I was living in Winkerbank in Sheffield. My mum when I was a kid, and she rented me 3 tapes from there. And it was on a little spinner rack, and you could take the covers. It wasn't like they'd put it in a mum and pop video cover. You would just take the whole thing. And it was Day of the Dead. Trick or Treat, of course. You know my love for Trick or Treat.
You were in the shirt.
And Elm Street 3, yes. Yeah. Sammy Kerr on tour. Songs in the Key of Death. And I remember just being blown away by it, and it changed me because not just the movie itself, because I always had a fascination with special effects and movie production, but the music, the theme tune, Dokken, Dream Warriors. That blew my mind. I loved George Lynch's guitar playing, Don Docken's voice. Many years later, I got to talk to them about that separately in separate interviews while writing for Powerplay as a music journalist. I
don't think we were lucky enough. I know in the States, the Dokken music video was tagged onto the end of the VHS tape.
Was it?
Before the VHS tape.
I never knew that.
And that was like, I think if you find some of the US VHS covers, there's probably a little sticker on there that says featuring the Dokken music video.
I love it that they got both Patricia Arquette and Robert.
Those were the really cool kind of crossover videos where you didn't just show clips of the film; it actually incorporated actors in
very
scenes.
fourth wall.
So, what was your kind of point deciding to write this book? What was your blueprint? Because obviously the book's divided into many, many different sections. It incorporates your story and introductions into loving tapes and the journey you've been on. But there's also other outside influences. There's compilation lists of different tapes.
I didn't want it
essential
to be just
tapes people need to see.
Yeah, well, essential tapes I say they need to see. There's 25 of my VHS night essentials. There's also a full listing and rundown of all the video nasties in it. But the thing for me was I'd found with the book I did before it, Bagged and Boarded, which is about my time working in a comic shop, that if you can strike a personal chord in there as well, then all the non-fiction elements have that much more meaning to them. So, like in the comic book store, I talked a lot about loving the stock and loving the characters that I was selling to people, but also the emotional stuff that was going on with people's lives. Because we would make friends with customers and so on. I'm sure you do here. Yep. You know what's going on in people's lives, and you want to keep up with that. I've still got a bunch of friends now that I met as customers, which is brilliant. I love them dearly. But I'd found that putting that emotional angle on it connected with readers, and it connected with me writing it as well. So when I did VHS Ate My Brain, I wanted to offer something that had an element of capturing an era before it vanished. So going to video stores, buying tapes, taping stuff yourself, and filling the space. I used to fill the space with random music videos, you know, and bits of 5-minute cartoons and so on, just so that there was something right to the end. And I would laboriously make lists of what things were on, and what else. When I taped sci-fi movies off the Sci-Fi Channel and things like that, I would do on the case. I would cover it in stickers and draw logos for them. Yeah. You know, you've got to put effort into these things if they're going to matter. I remember I taped Poltergeist and Poltergeist 2 back to back. They'd shown a double bill one night on like Channel 4 or something. I was like, brilliant, I've got an unused and an unneeded big box case, and I did a special Poltergeist 1 and 2 omnibus
double bill, brilliant.
You know, felt tip, it was the good stuff.
Oh, that's amazing.
But I think with things like that, it is an era that is now forgotten. It's come back in recent years with Stranger Things and such like, but that tangible feeling of holding something that can either blow your mind or make you laugh pointing at it, like this is crap, but I'm still really entertained by it. Being able to hold it in your hands and not just click through a big catalogue, you can have that connection. It's like, I liken it to vinyl.
Oh, 100%.
You can look at the artwork, you can look at the tapes, and maybe this one, maybe this
Yeah.
one. These two would go together for a night.
I think it's something that is very much missed, just to deviate a little bit from tapes, but it's the same kind of thing. Well, I always say Spotify is so big now, you never remember when your favourite band releases a new album. Nowadays, you don't remember that day you clicked on it in Spotify, but you remember the time when you went to the record shop and brought or queued up for that album, got so excited, went down into town on the bus and stuff like that. You remember
went to town on the
things.
bus. Went to for me as a kid, it was Powerhouse Records in Sheffield, the old rock and metal shop, which was tiny and tacked onto a pub.
Yeah.
And I remember being in there. I remember seeing the shirts there and the smell of it and everything. I remember being really excited when he slipped the vinyl into the bag with the logo on. You get to walk through town with the logo. It's like, yes.
But again, it is exactly the same with videotapes. You're scrolling through Netflix now, you choose a film, you're bored of it in 10 minutes, you can go on to the next one, whereas with videotapes, it's the same, everyone's got the same stories. They spend so long in the shop looking and deciding what film to choose.
Yeah.
So you was watching that film if it was boring after 20 minutes or not. You paid for it, you made that journey, you put that effort in. So you were watching it.
Because you've made the journey, and often you would watch tapes. I watched hundreds of tapes alone because I didn't sleep, ever. But more often than not, you would watch them with friends or family members. And by the act of getting hold of the tapes, choosing something and watching it together, those tapes become autobiographical. It's something from like High Fidelity, the movie with John Cusack, I prefer the movie to the book, where he rearranges his vinyl in autobiographical order. that spoke to me. I do that because I do tapes like that.
Really?
I put
Come on,
them
give us
together.
an example.
Well, the early ones are all put together with like China O'Brien, Return of the Living Dead 2, Trick or Treat, and then Trick or Treat moves into Palace premiere tapes, and that's like, now I moved on to martial arts, then it moves into Cynthia Rothrock tapes, and then it moves back into some of the bigger ones like The Thing, and I wanted things that were based on books for a while, so there's some Stephen King ones, there's The Fog and things like that, you know. So there's all the little pathways to getting them put together, and that's the autobiographical element of
That's
it.
fantastic.
That I just love it. But because they are a tangible thing, they, not to liken them to antiques, which they technically are now, I guess, but they're like a carriage clock or something like that. You can hold it and it's like, this reminds me of grandma, this reminds me of a relative. Like if I got, I was looking at one point for a copy of the Battle of the Rock Lords. It was a GoBots spin-off, an animated one, which I saw at the cinema when I was about 6, and I dragged my mother to it. And she often says, I remember watching all these things with your Star Trek and Superman and whatnot at the cinema. And I remember going, I remember you making me sit through Battle of the Rock Lords.
Yeah. Do you remember the title?
No, she didn't remember the title. I remember
film
the title.
we went to see.
But I remember we saw it in Chesterfield, and I remember being a kid. We went to Wimpy.
There you go.
These things that connect you to a time and a place. It's like a direct, definite link to that person and that part of your life. It's not that we as collectors live in the past or actively want to go back to a different era. Some days I do, but it's more just having that marker along the way. That's how I would describe the love for this stuff. And I just wanted to not sell that. Yeah, I wanted to sell some books, but I wanted to tell that in a way that people would enjoy and connect with. And it really surprised me how well it works. I'm very flattered, but whenever anyone sends me a message, I often find them in my message requests folder on Facebook. I was like, I didn't even know that was there. I'm really sorry.
That's a nice little nugget of goodness right there.
Oh, it's really wholesome because the people that have sent me messages about the book over the years, there's always an element of, I would go to the video store with my dad.
Yeah. Everybody, I've probably said it already, everybody who comes into this shop, when I speak to you, speak to anybody, there's only so many stories attached to VHS. Everyone's got the same one. It's always a slight variation, but I never get bored of hearing the same story being told, because it's always told with so much heart.
It's wholesome.
Yeah.
It's wholesome. I mean, I would go to my dad's house on a weekend as a kid, and the Friday night ritual was 3 shops in a row. We'd drive out and get tapes. We'd go and get a couple of videos, usually something like Ghostbusters or Police Academy, or there'd always be a comedy and like an action adventure one. So like Romancing the Stone with the Police Academy, or whatever like that. and then we'd go to the next door along, which was the off license, and he'd get some beers and I'd get some pop or something. And then the third one with chip shop.
Yeah,
and we'd get
mate, that's a
fish and
night.
chips. And then that would be our evening. We would go and have fish and chips, watch 2 movies, and then talk nonsense into the small
I want to
hours.
do that right now.
It was great.
That's
But
quality.
those nights were very special, and they VHS got me through some really bad nights as well. When I was living in Hillsborough, we had a time where there was a lot of vandalism going on in the neighbourhood. There was like a group of youths that were literally burning cars and damaging people's houses, and by going out and getting 2 tapes, I could just shut the curtains and the door, and I would be somewhere else.
Yep.
I would be, I'd be with Beetlejuice, or I'm just looking at the tapes over here now, I'm thinking, who else would I have been with? But I'm like, Christine.
You'd have been
American
cruising with the
England.
2 Corys in License to Drive. Or
Yes.
something like that.
Oh, mate.
That's an escapism.
That is real escapism. That's one of the things that got me into John Hughes movies as well.
Yeah.
That was escapism from school, because my school was hard as hell.
Yeah.
It was not a nice place. And seeing these sort of picture perfect places, Shermer, Illinois,
Yeah.
that didn't even exist, was escapism from that. So yeah, some of it's escapism, some of it is just wanting that link.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned markers in time. When you did this book in 2014, this is around the time I actually met you around this time. Cause,
Yes, I was writing it.
You was writing this book, and there was a number of documentaries that came out around this time when we did a show in VHS Ate tracking at the old Screen 22 in Nottingham, and that's where we met for the first time. And I spoke about it before. I spoke about it with Josh at lunch meet. There seemed to be a lot of traction around VHS around that time. I don't know if you noticed it.
I did.
At that time. Looking back, it certainly looks like that.
It
I
wasn't.
think
really
those documentaries were a big part of it.
Adjust Your Tracking is my favourite one, and not just because I contributed to the Kickstarter for it and got my name in the credits.
Oh, nice.
So if you look me up on IMDb, I'm listed as an executive producer. There's like 191 of us. I love it. I think at that time it wasn't really noticed by the mainstream, and because of that, it was kind of left to its own devices to see. It's more prevalent now with, as I mentioned, Stranger Things and a lot of the retro things that get attention now. But back then it was like ours, and we could do what the hell we wanted with it.
Yeah, it's cheap as shit, most of it was.
Mate, some of my best tapes that I've ever had were like 10p, 25p from charity shops. And I've looked them up on eBay now, and it's like 70 what?
Well, I'm very, very guilty of really screwing up sometimes, because when I started around the same time, when I met you and stuff, I was doing the initial straight-to-video project, which was movie soundtracks, and doing the physical release. I definitely wanted a physical release, but I wanted to present it in a tape box. So I must have got rid of dozens of decent tapes because I wanted the box.
Yeah.
I was still in that weird crossover mindset.
And they had to be the big box ones.
Yeah,
so
I was throwing the tapes out and pulling the covers away. I think I've managed to get most of them back. The ones which I originally regretted was an Aliens big box, Upworld with Anthony Michael Hall, which is a shocking film, but I always wanted that back. But I'm still after a big box. Stand by me if anybody's got one.
Oh, the one I regret the most is the Video Dead. It was my favourite one I'd ever had, and it was long after I put the book out, and I was like, the kids need this, the money from this more than I do.
Okay.
So I'm a dad, and I'd had to shrink the collection down. It was massive at one point.
Yeah.
It was obscene, so I did have to shrink it down quite a lot. And so I've no real use for this. I've done the book. I've said my piece. I'll have to let go of this. And I think I sold it for like 15 quid, and it's about 40 now.
Yeah, it's one of the big ones.
And I adore that, especially because with the reversible cover.
And both covers are great.
Yeah, and the cover image appears in the film.
Yeah,
it does appear in the movie. There is a zombie coming out of the TV in it. But it introduced me to a lot of weird stuff I wouldn't have seen otherwise VHS as well. Like now you can see reviews and stuff. A lot of the time you really had to take a gamble. And
my biggest rule on that one, especially back in the day, if it didn't have photos on the back, the cover image was very deceiving. It was never going to be anything as cool as that.
No, yeah, and I remember some where I'd seen, I'd got martial art. I was big into ninja movies for a while, especially the Joseph Lai ninja. Do you know them about the Joseph Lai ninja movies? Right, Joseph Lai, I think it was Godfrey Ho. they bought up a load of failed or unreleased action thrillers from like China and Vietnam and a bunch of places, and recut them, dubbed them, and added scenes of white guys in luminous ninja, like pink and yellow ninja costumes, having sword fights, and included references to the ninjas in the redone dub script.
Right.
Now he did, I think, at one count it was 85 of these, but they've all had multiple titles, so there's hundreds of them potentially. And I was obsessed with those, and some of those had the same photos on the back. Like 4 different films had the same photo. I'm like, that's not even in that one. That's the depths that I went to in the rubbish I would watch, but I loved it because it was on a tape.
What's the more recent one? It's not probably more recent, but we're talking 30 years. Is it Best of the Best, where they use the same artwork for each one?
Yeah, with Eric Roberts in it.
Remove some people or add some people on the cover of it or something.
Very badly cut and pasted on, yeah.
Fantastic, I love that. That's wicked. So this book comes out in 2014.
Yes.
Fast forward almost 10 years, the video community has changed quite considerably. Do you reflect that in the book at all? Or?
It has, yeah. There's an extra section in it called VHS Ate the World, which talks about what went on after it, with it becoming more noticeable in popular culture and getting picked up more on by the media. With people saying, look how many thousands this Back to the Future sold for, that sort of thing. And it picks up on how I've changed since then, how I've introduced the kids to lots of horror characters just from them seeing them around the house. I don't show them the movies, don't worry. It's how things have changed. There's lots of photos in there from throughout my years as a collector. So some of them don't just have VHS in the photos. Some of them have got like paperbacks and comics and stuff in there as well, because I collect a lot of different things, unfortunately. It's a journey, and I think that the new stuff I've put in there helps to complete that journey. I'm always going to love tapes. I don't think I'm ever going to have a giant collection anymore. I just don't have the space or the available time to enjoy them as they should. And that was one of the things that made it hurt less when I sold off a lot of the collection, was I wanted it to go to people that would enjoy it properly and not just watch it and chuck it away. I wanted people to appreciate how bad some of these things are, but love them for it.
Wonderful, man. So the new revised edition of VHS Ate My Brain we're at June the 17th right now.
It's out now.
Is it out now officially?
It's out today.
And where can people pick it up?
They can pick it up on Amazon, and there will be a link where you can get signed ones directly from me. There's some signed ones in the shop as well.
Yeah, if anyone wants to
come get some.
80s Video Shop, pick a copy up. As you see, they fit perfectly on the old school racking.
I was delighted by this. Rob said to me,
he did it on purpose. He did it on purpose, honestly.
Absolutely on purpose. This was by design. I wanted them to go on video racks. No, that was unintentional. But it's out now, and come to the 80s Video Shop because it's brilliant anyway.
Excellent, man. Wonderful job.
Thank you very much.
Right.
So that was my launch night for VHS Ate My Brain. Revised edition is out now on Amazon. You can get some copies at a link below. I'll put some signed ones, and there are some signed ones here in the shop at the 80s Video Shop in Alfreton, which absolutely rules. I love this place dearly. Come along, it is so fun just to see these things and remember how great these things were in the first place. So thanks to everyone that came along tonight, really appreciate it, and thanks for you to watching this episode of Planet Hex.